Welcome to EPG Pathshala. My name is Aditi Wazir and I am going to talk about differences between adult and child learners. Introduction. Pedagogy literally means the art and science of educating children and often is used as a synonym for teaching. More accurately, pedagogy embodies teacher-focused education. In the pedagogic model, teachers assume responsibility for making decisions about what will be learned, how it will be learned, and when it will be learned. Teachers direct learning, is the leader, and is completely responsible and accountable for all learning decisions, such as what is to be taught, how is it to be taught, when is it to be taught, how learning is to be measured, etc. Andragogy is based on a need to be treated as a respected, self-directed adult, according to Knowles in 1968. Andragogy encourages a relationship of mutuality and reciprocity between learner and teacher. Both learner and teacher, for example, are involved in designing the learning experience and in evaluating the learning experience. According to Note 2010, there is a mutual and reciprocal exchange between learner and teacher that endangers respect on part of both parties. Supporters of andragogy maintain that how adults learn is different from how children learn. The most significant difference between pedagogy and andragogy is the self-concept of the learner. Adults must be taught differently from children if learning is to be effective. In other words, the curriculum should be flexible in relation to increased knowledge, such as how adults learn. As new information comes along, must be included in the curriculum. On the other hand, as information becomes obsolescent, it may have to be modified or eliminated from the curriculum. Altbach, 2005. Objectives of the module. Learning is life, not just preparation for life. However, our academic system has grown in reverse order. Subjects and teachers constitute the starting point and learners are secondary. In conventional education, the learner is required to adjust to an established curriculum. Our learning nowadays consists of someone else's experience and knowledge. As a result, many learners leave school having lost interest in learning. Even good-intentioned educators can squelch naturally inquisitive instincts by controlling the learning environment. By adulthood, some people view learning as a chore and a burden. The study of how adults learn is an important endeavor in many college programs today. With a growing number of adults entering the college scene, the study of andragogy, contrasting how adults learn with children learn, is one of the best ways to discovering more about this fascinating field. What is learning? Learning is often defined as a relatively lasting change in behavior that is a result of experience. Learning is an adaptive function by which our nervous system changes in relation to the stimuli in the environment, thus changing our behavioral responses and permitting us to function in our environment. The process occurs initially in our nervous system in response to environmental stimuli. Neural pathways can be strengthened, pruned, activated, or rerouted, all of which cause changes in our behavioral responses. Learning is more or less a permanent change in behavior, potential that occurs as a result of practice. It is not a change due to motivational factors, sensory adaptation, fatigue, maturation, senescence, or stimulus change. There are three main types of learning: classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and observational learning. Both classical and operant conditioning are forms of associative learning, in which associations are made between events that occur together. Observational learning is just as it sounds, learning by observing others. Behavioral psychology is basically interested in how our behavior results from the stimuli both in the environment and within ourselves. What is pedagogy? Pedagogy is the science and art of education, specifically instructional theory. An instructor develops conceptual knowledge and manages the content of learning activities in pedagogical settings. Modern pedagogy has been strongly influenced by the theories of three major heavyweights in the science of human development: Jean Piaget's cognitive theory of development, Lev Vygotsky and Jerome Bruner's social interaction and cultural theory. Piaget's theory of cognitive development, 1936. Piaget's theory of cognitive development explains how a child constructs a mental model of the world. He disagreed with the idea that intelligence was a fixed trait and regarded cognitive development as a process which occurs due to biological maturation and interaction with the environment. The goal of the theory is to explain the mechanisms and processes by which the infant and then the child develops into an individual who can reason and think using hypotheses. Piaget proposed 4 stages of cognitive development which reflect the increasing sophistication of children's thought. First, sensory motor, which lasts from birth to age 2 years. The main achievement during this is object permanence, which is knowing that an object still exists even if it is hidden. It requires the ability to form a mental representation, that is a schema of the object. The second stage is the pre-operational stage, which lasts from ages 2 to the ages 7 years. During this stage, young children are able to think about things symbolically. This is the ability to make one thing, a word or an object, stand for something other than itself. Thinking is still egocentric, and the infant has difficulty taking the viewpoint of others. The third stage is the concrete operational stage, which lasts from age 7 to age 11 years. Piaget considered the concrete stage a major turning point in the child's cognitive development because it marks the beginning of logical or operational thought. This means the child can work things out internally in their head rather than physically try things out in real world. Children can conserve number by age 6, mass by age 7, and weight by age 9. Conservation is the understanding that something stays the same in quantity even though its appearance changes. The fourth stage is the formal operational stage, which starts from age 11 and adolescence lasts up to adulthood. The formal operational stage begins at approximately age 11 and lasts into adulthood. During this time, people develop the ability to think abstract concepts and logically test hypotheses. Each child goes through the stages in the same order, and child development is determined by biological maturation and interaction with the environment. Although no stage can be missed out, there are individual differences in the rate at which children progress through stages, and some individuals may never attain the later stages. Piaget has been extremely influential in developing educational policy and teaching practice. Lev Vygotsky's social development theory. Vygotsky's theories stress the fundamental role of social interaction in the development of cognition, 1978. Vygotsky believed strongly that community plays a central role in the process of making meaning. Social learning tends to precede development. He has developed a socio-cultural approach to cognitive development. According to Vygotsky, much important learning by the child occurs through social interaction with a skillful tutor. The tutor may model behaviors and provide verbal instructions for the child. The child seeks to understand the actions or instructions provided by the tutor, who is often the parent or the teacher, then internalizes the information, using it to guide or regulate their own performance. He referred to them as just that, the more knowledgeable other. MKOs can be parents, adults, teachers, coaches, experts, professionals, but also things you might not first expect. such as children, friends, and computers. He describes something known as the zone of proximal development, ZPD, which is a key feature of his theory. There are two levels for attainment of ZPT. Level 1, the present level of development. This describes what the child is capable of doing without any help from others. Level 2, the potential level of development. This means what the child could potentially be capable of with the help from other people or teachers. The gap between level 1 and level 2, which is the present and potential development, is what Vygotsky described as this zone of proximal development. When a child does attain their potential, this shift occurs and the child can continue learning more complex, higher level material. Another important feature of this theory is scaffolding. When an adult provides support for a child, they will adjust the amount of help they give depending on their progress. This progression of different levels of help is scaffolding. Vygotsky provided a very influential theory which provided a meaningful social context in the development of learning. The emphasis of cultural knowledge was something unseen in Piaget's theory. Bruner's theory of development. In his research on the cognitive development of children in 1966, Jerome Bruner proposed three models of representation. Enactive representation, also called action-based, which lasts from 0 to 1 years. This appears first. It involves encoding action-based information and storing it in our memory. For example, in the form of a movement as a muscle memory, a baby might remember the action of shaking a rattle. The child represents past events through motor responses. That is, an infant will shake a rattle which has just been removed or dropped, as if the movement themselves are expected to produce the accustomed sound. Iconic representation, which is image-based, which lasts from year 1 to year 6. This is where information is stored visually in the form of images, a mental picture in the mind's eye. For some, this is conscious, others say they don't experience it. This may explain why, when we are learning a new subject, it is often helpful to have diagrams or illustrations to accompany verbal information. Symbolic representation, which is language-based, 7 years onwards. This develops last. This is where information is stored in the form of a code or symbol such as language. This is the most adaptive form of representation, for actions and images have a fixed relation to what they represent. Dog is a symbolic representation of a single class. Symbols are flexible in that they can be manipulated, ordered, classified, etc. So the user isn't constrained by actions or images. In the symbolic stage, knowledge is stored primarily as words, mathematical symbols, or in other symbol systems. For Bruner, 1961, the purpose of education is not to impart knowledge, but instead to facilitate a child's thinking and problem-solving skills, which can then be transferred to a range of situations. The role of the teacher should not be to teach information by rote learning, but instead to facilitate the learning process. This means that a good teacher will design lessons that help students discover the relationship between bits of information. To do this, a teacher must give students the information they need, but without organizing it for them. The use of the spiral curriculum can aid the process of discovery learning. What is andragogy? Malcolm Knowles in 2011 defined andragogy as the art and science of helping adults learn and described self-inquiry as the adult learning process. There are certain assumptions regarding how adults learn. Adult learning is viewed as problem-based and collaborative, not didactic. Adults are self-directed and autonomous and determine individual learning goals. As self-directed learners, they want to determine the knowledge that will be learned, the projects in which they will participate, and how they will demonstrate the knowledge gained. Self-directed learners are proactive, learn more things, and learn better than do learners who are reactive learners and are passively engaged in the learning. They enter into the learning with greater motivation and more purposeful. As a result, new knowledge is retained better and longer, as well as applied with greater ease to new situations. Adult learners have a variety of life experiences and prior knowledge from work, school, family, and community involvements. Respect for adult learners needs to be demonstrated during the learning process. In particular, acknowledging the wealth of knowledge and experiences they bring to the learning situation. Adult learners need to be treated as equals in the learning situation and be given opportunities to communicate freely. Connections to be made by the learner between prior knowledge and the new knowledge. These connections help the adult learner see the value of the new knowledge to real life situation and enable the learner to apply the new knowledge to meaningful situations. Adult learners are goal-oriented. Most adults engage in a learning experience to create a change in skill, behavior, current knowledge, or attitude. Learning needs to focus on tasks involving a component of the learner's social roles. Adult learners are motivated to learning that can have immediate application to their real life situations. The adult learner needs to have a reason for the learning. Application to the learner's work or other responsibilities help the adult learner see value in gaining the new knowledge. Adult learners are practical and focus on the parts of new knowledge that are most useful for them, either in their work or other areas of their life. Motivation in adult learners. Knowles 2011 indicates that motivation in adult learners is both extrinsic and intrinsic. They are the need to make new friendships and engage with new associates, meeting the external expectation or recommendation to participate in new learning from someone in authority. Adults may become motivated to get involved in new learning for personal advancement, such as achieving a job promotion, obtain advanced status in employment, or stay competitive. Obtaining or maintaining a license, certification, maintaining or developing skills, or adapting to changes within a job can be motivation for adult learning experiences. To be able to assist the community, be better prepared to participate in community work or serve mankind. To acquire new knowledge, to escape boredom and relief from ordinary daily routines of work or home, with a contrast of other more exciting opportunities. Learning for the sake of gaining new knowledge, obtaining knowledge for its own sake, and appeasing an inquisitive mind. Retention is an important part of the adult learning process. It is directly impacted by the amount of practice or use during the learning. Adult learning have barriers to their motivation to learn. They have many personal and work responsibilities that must be balanced with the demands of learning. Lack of time, financial resources, confidence, or information regarding opportunities to learn, scheduling difficulties, as well as childcare and transportation issues can impact the adult learner's motivation to learn. Past educational or work experiences may be barriers to learning. This occurs if the new knowledge is in conflict with past education or life experiences. This conflict needs to be addressed before the learners can actively engage in the learning. Pedagogy versus andragogy. What are the similarities between child and adult learners? The learner, be it a child or an adult, comes to learning process with life experiences and prior knowledge that is used by the learner to make connections to the new learning. For learning to take place, both adults and children need to be immersed in what is being learned. This is needed to help ensure that the new knowledge is internalized to the point where the knowledge can be transferred into appropriate situations. Since adults have more prior knowledge and more life experiences to bring to the learning situation, internalization and transfer may take less time than the learning of a child. Approximations in learning take place in the learning of adults as well as children. Due to the natural learning process, both adults and children need to use the learning or employ the knowledge gained. The more the knowledge is used, the closer the approximations come to conventions and become internalized. Feedback to both the adult and child helps each learner fine-tune the approximations. Once the learning has been internalized, the knowledge is transferred into new situations by both the adult and child learners. A major characteristic that impacts the natural learning process is engagement of both adult and child learners. The more actively engaged in the learning process, the faster the knowledge is obtained and the better the knowledge is learned. Both the adult and child learner need to be motivated to learn. The motivation can be intrinsic or extrinsic. Active engagement is influenced by a risk-free environment, self-directed learner characteristics, alignment with life experiences and prior knowledge, immersion, demonstrations, feedback, and learner responsibility, as well as motivation for the adult and child learner. Pedagogy versus andragogy. What are the differences? Learning behavior. Adult learners are self-directed. They have control over their learning experience and they are more responsible for their own learning. They are also deeply involved not only in planning but also in evaluating their learning, as they know what knowledge they want to acquire. On the contrary, young learners are not self-directed. They still depend on their teachers throughout the learning process. Therefore, their teachers should be responsible not only for what will be taught, but also how it will be taught and evaluated. Role of the learner's experience. Adult learners have clearly more experience than young learners. Their experience becomes the main resource of both their learning and the personal identity they have developed. As the richer and more diverse their experience, the more diversity they can bring to their own learning. Young learners, on the other hand, present little personal experience by default, and so it is impossible for this experience to serve as a learning resource. It can be used only to build upon. Orientation to learning. Adult learners seek information that is useful in their personal life and work environment. This audience demands that their learning is relevant to their real life issues, problems and tasks, and that their education will boost their performance levels and help them live lives in a better and more satisfying way. Young audiences' learning, on the contrary, is subject-centered, meaning that the subject determines the sequence according to which the learning content units will be presented and taught. Readiness to learn. Adult learners' readiness to learn can be triggered by literally anything. A sudden change in their lives, a need for dealing with life tasks and problems more successfully, the desire for self-improvement and self-development, and so on. Adults need to know why to learn something. As soon as they answer this question, they are ready to start. Children, on the other hand, are usually told what to learn. The reason behind their learning is developing their skills to achieve the next level of mastery. Motivation for learning. Intrinsic motivational factors, self-esteem, self-confidence, desire for better quality of life, curiosity, self-development and recognition are only a few factors that motivate adult learners to learn. Needless to say, intrinsic incentives are much more powerful than extrinsic ones, and thus adult learners, more often than not, are more satisfied with the learning process, more focused, more persistent, and more eager to apply their knowledge more frequently and successfully than younger learners. On the other hand, children and teenagers are mostly motivated by extrinsic factors such as getting good grades or other perks, or avoiding the consequences of failure. Adults challenge new information, but younger students implicitly accept it. We'd have a problem on our hands if our 9-year-old students question the legitimacy of their multiplication tables or were skeptical about the spherical shape of the earth. For adult students, however, skepticism is a part of the path to learning. It's not just expected, it's encouraged. The way that adults learn best is by challenging new ideas, comparing them to preconceived notions, life lessons, and other information, thereby cementing the new information into their minds. Adults pursue education with immediate application and relevance, whereas younger students simply engage in education without a clear sense of direction. Thus, their education has immediate application to their daily life. Being able to walk from the classroom into the office makes one's education truly applicable. For this reason, adults enter degree programs and areas of education that will immediately enhance their career, meet their needs, or solve their current problems. For the adult, education is relevant. It is clear that andragogy can be highly motivational, as adult learners are more goal-oriented than younger learners. This is why offering them meaningful learning experiences can make a real difference in achieving learning outcomes. Conclusion: the andragogic model asserts that 5 issues be considered and addressed in a formal learning. They include letting learners know why something is important to learn, showing learners how to direct themselves through information, relating the topic to the learner's experiences, motivation. People will not learn until they are ready and motivated to learn. Requires helping them overcome inhibitions, behaviors, and beliefs about learning. Knowles himself conceded that 4 of andragogy's 5 key assumptions apply equally to adults and children. The sole difference is that children have fewer experiences and pre-established beliefs than adults, and thus have less to relate. In the information age, the implications of a move from teacher-centered to learner-centered education are staggering. Postponing or suppressing this move will slow our ability to learn new technology and gain competitive advantage. Thank you.